It's an honor and it's a great pleasure for me to be a part of this beautiful gathering, by the way. I mean, TRT World become a very unique and one of the very elegant platforms in the global media network. In that context, this forum, there are lots of valuable experts. For sure we'll discuss some of the most critical political and economic issues in the world, which we are experiencing nowadays. The global powers, the diversified economies, the developed countries, lots of issues nowadays really creates big opportunities at the same time threats. But before I start this, ladies and gentlemen, right now the world is facing challenges unfortunately undermining peace, security, stability, and prosperity. Trade wars and those power struggles between developed countries, declines in business and consumer confidence, rising policy uncertainty, and the use of economic sanctions for political gains, unfortunately raise concerns about global economic growth. Political instability, regional conflicts, and terrorism create significant social and economical costs. I mean, Turkey is one of the leading countries in this context, which is paying the high upmost in that sense. The current world order has failed to address these problems, and I am saying this, everybody's discussing nowadays. There's this global recession concern, right? Which the world may lead to. And one of the biggest concerns in that sense, comparing to 2008 and 2009 crisis, do we have this unique, aligned, consolidated approach about this? Again, all the G20 finance ministerial meeting, we are discussing this, and unfortunately we are not saying yes yet. And what we're going to see, we don't know as well. In fact, those the issues that we have discussed produces a much bigger, higher rate solutions that anyone could expect. And we clearly need new and more effective ways to address these problems and sow the seeds of a better future. This is a must. Recent experience has shown that neglecting the security or economic interests of others and abusing economic or political power to pursue one-sided gains have proven to only amplify, unfortunately again, existing disputes. Going forward, we need to find ways to reduce regional and global conflicts and promote peace and security. We must establish a new order that is based on regional and international cooperation, as well as mutual benefit and respect. For the world economy to prosper, we must put aside power competition and work together decisively to reduce tensions in international trade. Abandoning protectionist policies. This is a fact. Unfortunately, this protectionist approach we are facing, it's a strong fact. Moreover than that, reducing tariff rates, eliminating barriers to free trade and renegotiating trade agreements to address the needs of trading partners will ultimately benefit all parties. On the other hand, currency issue, depreciation issue, competing from that perspective, the trade volume. Decreasing regulatory uncertainty, enhancing transparency, and establishing a rule-based trade system will further increase gains from trade, where still currently WTO is discussing nowadays in that sense as well. For better global integration, we must also cooperate on reforms related to international taxation and financial regulation, climate change, and governance. Ladies and gentlemen, based on PPP, power purchasing parity, the contribution of developed countries to the world's total income is 40%. While this contribution is more than 60% in developing countries. The gap between the two groups of countries turned in favor of developing countries since 2007. And this has been widening all the way through. And everybody is expecting, we all know about, at least hear a little bit about, by 2030, just as an emerging two countries, India and China, GDP will be more than G7 by 2030. China and India, just two of it. Almost half of more than 3 billion population of the global population. And this is another fact as well. Despite generating most of the world income, emerging countries can rarely use their own currencies in international transactions. Today, the US dollar stands out as the most widely used currency in global trade and global financial transactions. And the dependence of the whole international financial system on a single currency created significant risks. For example, having a monopoly power over the international payment system gives the US the ability to use the threat of economic sanctions to resolve political conflicts in its own favor. To reduce our dependence on the US dollar, like many other countries, the recent years, we have been signing bilateral agreements with our important trade partners to trade in our both countries' local currencies. Everybody has started to do this. Even nowadays, we are started to seeing oil consumption, oil purchase agreements between two countries rather than US dollar nowadays. We have seen it between between China and Russia, the other countries as well. Okay, let me turn to economic developments in Turkey. You know, Turkey is the world's 16th largest economy, while the 12th largest economy in case of public purchasing parity. As a result of successful economic policies implemented during the AK Party era, our real per capita increased more than 3 times, moving our country in the upper middle income group, that sense. Turkey, right now, is well integrated into the global supply chain and countries a journey to become an industrial powerhouse at a global scale. We are located at the main transportation corridor of the global economy connecting 2 continents. It's a simple 2 words, but moreover than that, 4 hours of air flight from India to London, from Moscow to Dubai. The region itself covers almost 1/3 of the global GDP and population. Turkey is just in the center of this network. And having said that, Turkey, in the last 17 years, created a strong infrastructural base. Transportation, telecommunication, energy, all these factors and elements that we named count so far, Turkey created the strongest ever infrastructure in this period. Time and again, the Turkish economy has shown significant resilience against internal and external shocks. Over the past decade, we have successfully overcome the global financial crisis, the treacherous coup attempt in 2016, and most recently, a speculative currency attack in August 2018, and still managed to grow at an average annual rate of, in the last decade, more than 5%. Which, this growth is crucially important. Why? Because the number one question everybody is asking nowadays in the global economy, where will this growth coming from? This is what it is, and Turkey have this capacity. We have made considerable progress in terms of rebalancing, even better than anticipated. And right now I can announce this. Turkey in the last year, comparing to last year, break the record of current account surplus in the Turkish Republic's history. As of August, annualized current account balance gave $5.1 billion of surplus, which used to be, when I became the minister at July, which is around $60 billion of current account deficit. Not only with that, Turkey managed to reduce inflation rates to single digits since last year, which some of you may know or some of you may not. The CPI is around 25%. The PPI is around 45% just 1 year ago, and where we ended up at CPI is around 9.3%. In October, I think it's going to be a much lower rate than 9%. By the year end, our expectation is around 12%, which we named our new economic program. We announced the second new economical program this September, and with a new vision to raise social welfare in such a difficult environment and to implement structural reforms to ensure sustainable, healthy, and balanced growth. And within that aspect, we expect the Turkish economy will grow positive around 0.5 to 1% this year, but starting from next year by 5% with its natural base, we say it, close to our potential growth levels during this 3 years program period. Together with the decline of inflation and interest rates, improvements in markets' expectations, as well as by the contribution of the structural reforms. And we have achieved this economic success despite significant specific security problems in our southern border, we all know. Turkey hosts more than 3.6 million refugees from Syria, fled from the civil war, and ISIS, YPG, terror in that region. Not only security problem in that sense, the cost of this Turkey has faced during this 7-8 years end up with, till now, more than $40 billion. It affects the economy in that sense as well. We now, we now host the largest number of refugees worldwide, which is around 5 million. Some of them from Iraq, some of them from Syria, moreover than the other countries as well. The Republic of Turkey has managed to cope with every challenge it has faced since its inception, no matter how difficult, and thanks to its unique and dynamic socio-economic structure. In the past few weeks, Turkey has been subjected to many sanctions threats. Unfortunately, economic sanctions have become an element of blackmail against our country. Our financial markets have shown a tremendous level of resilience despite numerous threats of economic sanctions, which shows that we have developed immunity against outside shocks as well. With this strong financial architecture, Turkey's financial markets will be much stronger than ever, every single day, against any specific problems that we are going to face. Dear guests, Turkey's approach in international politics is to strengthen mutual trust and stability. In bilateral relations, regional partnerships, and global political arenas such as the UN, Turkey promotes participatory and inclusive policies. We act not only for our own interests, but also on the win-win principle in all our relations. In the geography we live in, we can establish peace and stability to the extent that we can coexist, produce together, and most importantly, gain together. It's unlikely that anyone will win in an atmosphere where the world order is threatened with conflict and terrorism. We must need a new approach in global politics and a new economic order. Turkey is ready to contribute to a structural transformation process that puts international cooperation at its center. And during this transition, it is important to correctly identify the disruptive aspects of the current world order. If we are talking about, instability affecting politics, trade, and humanitarian conditions, both individual countries and multilateral alliances must show without a shadow of doubt their determination to fight against terrorism. over the past 17 years, Turkey has been an important stakeholder in important regional or international projects. Our policies in politics and economics and security are centered around international cooperation and building and strengthening mutually beneficial relationships. Before I conclude, I would like to once again underline that if we believe this in this aspect, whatever the potential conflicts, threats, clashes the world gonna face, this is going to be the real deal that we can find a solution in a very frankly manner. Thank you for all your participation and have a great day. Wish you luck.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. And one of the questions I think that you put in the minds of our audience is one that I hope to be able to put to our panelists, which is, where you have the United States now, one day you may well have China. You may well have India as an economic superpower. Will it always be thus, that there will be the weaker powers, that there will be the emerging powers, and is it perhaps best to accept that and be beholden to the strong economic interests at the very top, rather than to directly try to compete? Now we've got an interesting discussion coming up. May I please welcome to the stage, first of all, getting fitted out with translation devices, the former president of Argentina, Eduardo Duhalde. Please, sir. Rafida, I've got to get the microphone up here. Sorry, I'm used to having them strapped on. Rafida Aziz, former Minister of International Trade and Industry for Malaysia. Rafida, if you don't mind taking the second seat next to Eduardo. C.Y. Leung is with us, former Chief Executive of Hong Kong. And may I welcome also Andrei Brzezinski, Chairman of the Board of the Foundation for Development and Support of the Valde Discussion Group. Thank you all very much indeed. Mr. President, can you hear? I think you're on channel 4. Yeah, number 4, I believe. 4. Yeah, that's very good. So, new horizons for emerging powers. Let's talk to somebody who, in the past through the Valde Group, has said the agenda was telling the world about Russia. Although, Andrei, I believe it has changed slightly now. You're talking about forming a global agenda, the assessment of global political and economic issues. But the Valde Club was there to basically push Russia, to say how wonderful the country was, and it is a big economic superpower. When it comes to emerging countries, what attitude do you think Russia takes now?
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here and to participate in such important discussion with so distinguished participants and guests. Thank you very much indeed again. About new horizons, competition or cooperation. Russian point of view, first of all, I am not Russian president, member of government. I am absolutely private person, thinking, read, if you like, and it's my private point of view. Russia is looking for a sort of balance between cooperation and competition. It's the two sides of the same coins. We cannot imagine cooperation without competition or competition without cooperation. Sport is a very good example of such kind of competition and cooperation. It's first. It's no problem. Perhaps the main problem of contemporary world is that we are living in new world with new technologies, especially in communication sphere. We're living in fantastic world with great opportunities for everybody, but at the same time, the level of interdependence is growing, but our ability to regulate, to organize global regulation is not growing. It's the main question. We should find a balance between regulation and interdependence. Maybe it's most important challenge for us, and maybe it's the answer on question. What's more important, cooperation or competition? Everything is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andre. And CY Leung, 2 years ago you were chief executive of Hong Kong. You see the turmoil in the country at the moment. Would you say Hong Kong is now struggling to come out of major powers' shadows, be it Britain from 50, 60, 100 years ago, be it perhaps China in its own way now, and with international trade deals, it's finding it very difficult to almost find an identity?
We are, of course, part of China. We're a big trading economy. Total volume of trade equals 4 times our GDP. The mainland of China is fast opening up in terms of trade, and Hong Kong itself. We actually had no card to play, but when I was chief executive of Hong Kong, we managed to convince our friends that make up the 10 nations of ASEAN to agree on a FTA deal, a free trade agreement deal, including Malaysia. Thank you very much. Because at the end of the day, all 11 parties realize that free trade is good for all. And as soon as we announced the conclusion of those negotiations, trade between Hong Kong and nearly all 10 member states of ASEAN sort of went up, including our trade with Malaysia. And so if you like, as a free economy, one of the freest in the world, and if you read reports prepared by some think tanks, leading think tanks in the world, we are the freest economy in the world. We have nothing to offer in return, but we managed to convince our partners that we should have free trade agreements with all. But let me just continue for a bit more, David. I know the theme of this session and other sessions that make up the TRT World Forum is very much about trade, globalization of trade, and so on. But may I submit that trade is not everything in life. It's important to have trade, to have good economic performance as a result, and so on. If you look at people-to-people relations and connectivity, which I think are related to trade as well, and if you use China's Belt and Road Initiative for International Cooperation as a reference point, there are 5 connectivities. Trade is one, finance is one, infrastructure is one, policies such as climate change policies is one. The last one is important. People-to-people connectivity. In the end, it's the people who make things work, people who make history. We look at China now, I'll finish in 5 seconds. 3.4% of the Chinese population now travel every year to foreign countries. This is not counting Hong Kong and Taiwan. And that's connectivity. Thank you.
There is no requirement to finish in 5 seconds, CY. So I want to ask you this one, and this is something for everybody to continue. The second part of our title for this evening's debate is cooperation or competition. And I wonder, this was the point I was interested in listening to the finance minister of Turkey making, and I want to ask each one of you this. Is it important as an emerging power to know your place, or to always aim high? Should you always be the junior partner? CY, this is to you first of all, and then we'll throw it open.
For me?
Yeah.
It is important to have competition. competition sharpens our skills and sharpens our minds. So let's compete by all means, but we should have positive competition through opening up our borders and opening up our hearts and minds. And that's what China has been sort of taking the last 40 years ever since reform started. And that's very much the Hong Kong position as well.
Rafida, headlines in this week's press about Southeast Asia are that Malaysia's Prime Minister has said your country is going to get caught in a trade war, that your country may be caught in a trade war between the United States and China. As an emerging power, and you will agree or disagree on whether Malaysia is an emerging power, but if that is the case, is it always likely to happen that the smaller countries will feel trapped and will have to make a choice? Or is there another way?
Well, let me just go back a little bit. Emerging powers came into being during those times when there was calmness in the global economic environment. So people competed, countries competed to be the best. And so we had emerging powers, developing economies, and some have graduated further on. And the least developing has become developing countries. But today we are in an environment of turmoil. You know, when policies are being enunciated via Twitter, it doesn't give much time for people to react and respond. And the trade war is one indication where some economic majors really do not follow the normal sense of governance in world fraternity. And from me, seeing the emergence of those so-called rising economies or emerging economies has dispensed almost with the bipolar world of yesteryear. We now have a third force, that new fraternity or club of emerging powers. And if these economies really collaborate rather than simply compete, because the environment is no longer calm, it's full of uncertainties, volatilities, and a lot of distortions. And there must be cooperation. Now, going back to what the Prime Minister said, this would be in layman's terms. You know, when two elephants fight, the mouse deer in the center will be squashed. Yeah, this is our Malay proverb. In essence, when you have two countries such as China or economies such as China and US, triggering trade wars, and in the process for the US, for example, sidelining the WTO rules that provided for that predictability. And by the way, I was one of the signatories of that WTO agreement in Marrakesh. It is sad to see all these rules have just been circumvented, ignored completely, and really, rule of law no longer prevails as far as trade rules are concerned. So, when you have these two giants having trade wars, there will be two impacts. One is the headwinds that it will cause economies that have links along the production value chain with either US or China. You know, if the products from China, the US puts on tariff, whoever is producing or is subscribing to whatever it is that produces the end product or service, they get hit too. So that's what I think the Prime Minister was afraid. But having said that, it's not fear that we should have. It is about realizing this will go on. Resolution is not in sight, at least in the near future. So now countries like the so-called emerging economies must strategize to work together to, first of all, overcome these headwinds, and then, I hate to say this, but benefit from the tailwinds that may also arise, because people divert their investments from either US or China to some extent, or divert their operating bases and supply bases from either China or the US to a third country. And certainly the emerging powers, the emerging economies stand in good stead if they market themselves properly, they collaborate properly to accept these flow investments.
Can I ask you in a moment about how you keep together a fraternity of, in some ways, fractured nations, because we've seen alliances, allegiances set up before that have come under strain. But could I also to continue your metaphor about the two elephants and the mouse?
The what?
You mentioned two elephants,
yeah,
and you mentioned a mouse getting squashed in the middle. there is also the story of the little mouse that frightens the two elephants.
Correct. So, yeah.
How do you go about that?
Let me put it this way. I think we have come to the stage where each country would know what its own strengths and weaknesses are. And in reality, it is collaboration that eventually will benefit them together by working on the complementarities and diversities to make for good collaboration amongst the private sector. You know, the governments are only there to set up infrastructure to facilitate. But it's the private sector, the business sector, that must now work together and trigger the kind of framework and systems or infrastructure that can facilitate their cross-border business to take advantage of these tailwinds.
And we'll talk about bilateral agreements as exposed by the Treasury Minister for Turkey in a little bit later. But Mr. President, Eduardo, former president of Argentina, I read that it was written by somebody that Argentina's fate was to fall down, get up, then fall over again, then get up over and over and over again. Now, that's an oversimplification, but Argentina has seen, as some people have put it, not just peaks and troughs, but convulsions over the last 50, 60 years. What lessons can emerging powers learn from that?
Microphone. The red one, the one at the bottom.
Empiezo de nuevo. En primer lugar, agradecer y felicitar a los organizadores. Es común en Turquía, cuando organizan eventos, hacerlo con esta categoría internacional. En segundo lugar, antes de hablar de Argentina, mi país, quiero contarles que estoy circunstancialmente, solo circunstancialmente, representando a Iberoamérica. Iberoamérica tiene el doble de habitantes que Estados Unidos de Norteamérica. Latinoamérica tiene además dobles kilómetros cuadrados y también duplicamos en más la población de Estados Unidos. Y Estados Unidos se ha convertido en lo que todos sabemos. El origen para nosotros es que repartieron bien la tierra. Los anglosajones repartieron muy bien la tierra y esto generó una economía de producción. Y en cambio nosotros, no siempre culpa de España, no siempre culpa de Portugal, sino también de nuestros gobiernos, estoy hablando de hace 150 o 160 años, seguimos repartiendo mal la tierra. Y se generaron naturalmente las oligarquías ganaderas, en el caso de Argentina, y en otras, la cafetera en Colombia, por ejemplo, y así se fueron creando oligarquías. Y todavía estamos sufriendo en parte esas oligarquías por el maridaje de ellos con los ejércitos. Los ejércitos surgían de esa clase social. Y estamos en un momento que el Papa Francisco lo plantea muy bien, muy bien. Ya las oligarquías no pueden más. Las movilizaciones de los jóvenes de esta semana en Chile, en Ecuador distinto, también hace poco tiempo, están demostrando que ya ese poder se está vaciando. Y el Papa llama lawfare, la ley de la guerra. Es decir, se han cambiado las circunstancias y ahora son los jueces. Todo está en venta. Hemos pasado de una economía de mercado a una sociedad de mercado y todo tiene precio.
If I may interrupt, Mr. President, if I may interrupt and just ask you about the challenges for emerging powers. If you put together all of the countries of your continent, and there is some kind of deal between them to take on the bigger powers, would that work? Not only in economic terms, but would it work in terms of cooperation or competition?
En primer lugar, quiero contarles que en diciembre del 2004, y siguiendo el modelo y el ejemplo de la Comunidad Económica Europea, se construyó la Comunidad Sudamericana de Naciones. 3 años después, siguiendo nuevamente el modelo europeo, se constituyó el UNASUR. Pero lo que no aprendimos todavía es que no tenemos que pelearnos más. A Europa le costó esa guerra con decenas de millones de muertos para entender que eso no sirve. Y países que tenían enfrentamientos centenarios, si no milenarios, con idiomas y religiones distintas, se pusieron de acuerdo. Eso es lo que le falta a Sudamérica. Sudamérica sola constituye el espacio integrado más grande del universo. Solamente. Tenemos la bendición de los que creemos en Dios, de Dios y no de la naturaleza, que ha desparramado en nuestro territorio todas las bondades. Ahí no hay sismos, no hay cataclismos, y hay enormes posibilidades de desarrollar nuestra potencia. Lo cierto es que no lo hemos hecho. Siempre en peleas internas de los países, y cuando nos juntamos los países nos peleamos entre ellos. Así no se puede seguir.
I'm wondering, thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. I'm wondering, and I'll throw this out for anybody, and please feel free at any time to pick up your microphone or lean into your microphone and agree or disagree with the person sitting next to you or further down the panel. But I want to go back to what the Treasury Minister said about bilateral agreements, because here we're talking about whether you should side with one country and then another country and then another country, and whether you are stronger because of that, because you can then diversify and break off, if you like, something when it goes wrong, or whether you need to gain strength through numbers. I don't know who would care to start with that one. Rashida, would you?
Well, I don't think we should work by numbers. We should look at whether, on a bilateral basis, there are certain key areas that we would like to liberalize towards each other's private sector business. Maybe on a bilateral basis, a country would like to liberalize services sector and some key areas of non-services or goods sector. But on the regional basis, 1 + 6 + 10 or whatever, it could be smaller number of sectors, but with some commonality amongst them. So you have to weigh the cost and benefit analysis. So, for example, Malaysia, yes, we have bilaterals with Japan, with everybody, but we also have ASEAN Plus. And of course, just to add on, bearing in mind that we are now together in the region, the ASEAN 10 has come together with the regional 6, which is China, India, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, to become, or now mooting, negotiating to sign or to launch the regional economic cooperation partnership, where we want to see these 16 countries really benefit out of areas of collaboration that we identify together.
So how do you, see why in just a second, may I throw this one in as well? So how do you, if you like, get a better deal than your neighbor, if that is what you want? How do you become the superior emerging power?
Is this for me?
Any question is for anybody. I just throw ideas out there.
The very reason why we have multilateral systems and agreements is, in the first place, is that the world has over 200 countries and economic jurisdictions. And if you rely solely on bilateral agreements, the world could end up with a huge number of permutations of bilateral agreements. People on the business side of things, and at the end of the day, it's not government negotiators, it's the business people who make things work. that bring the goodies to the families and the people and so on. We find it totally unpalatable. So we need bilateral agreements, but preferably we should have multilateral agreements.
May I also with this, because we're not just talking about economics.
Yes.
Security comes into this.
Yes.
And when you have bilateral agreements in terms of security cooperation, they can often go very wrong because you are only two against however many. Whatever deals you're signing, do you have to take into account the entire kaleidoscope of world politics, the geopolitics, economics, etc.?
I quite agree. And against whatever benefits businesses, economies derive from agreements, whether they're bilateral or multilateral, one should also factor in compliance cost. On the business front, it's important. When you have a multitude of bilateral agreements between countries, compliance costs could be quite hefty, and that could outweigh the benefits of having these free trade agreements or whatever economic agreements they are.
I'll come to you in just a moment to ask you for your personal assessment of what is happening in Hong Kong, of which you were the chief executive until very recently. But Andre, do you want to throw in something as somebody who's speaking not entirely only on behalf of Russia here, but partly on behalf of it with your Valde group? In terms of security cooperation and economic cooperation, are there always going to be the big boys and girls and the lesser powers? And do the big countries, and I include Russia in this, look at the other countries and think we can take advantage, if you like, of them because they can't really look after themselves without us?
It's a very good question because now we have discussed a lot such kind of problems, and it is a very serious challenge. First of all, when we speak about cooperation competition, it means that you should win against equals. It's very important. Your partners, your competitors should be not very far from you. Of course, it will be better if you win, but it's not most important. Most important, you must have ability to participate in the race. You should participate. It's more important. It's Olympic, like Olympic Games. But now, if we speak about Russia and Russian experts, they're thinking about, if you like, about system hierarchy of world networks. On the first level of these networks, the cells of these networks are countries. And it's clear. On the second level, the cells of these networks should be some unions. For instance, Belt and Road, I mean China, and Eurasian Economic Union. There were 5 or 6 countries: Kazakhstan, Russia, Armenia, something else. And it's a hierarchy of cooperation and hierarchy of competition. It's very important to build this, maybe very complicated, but extremely important for contemporary world construction, political, social, cultural. It's construction of identities and so on and so on. Of course, we on the basic level, most important level of network of the world networking is a business network for huge amount of small, big, and average entrepreneurs and so on and so on. Now, it seems to me Russia is thinking about new big Eurasian construction, if you like. New big Eurasian macro region and new rules of this region. Perhaps this macro region could be a sort of model for some country unions and so on and so on. Maybe the main topic of this conference, globalization, retreat of globalization. I think it's not retreat. It's a new way of globalization. globalization is unavoidable. But what kind of globalization do we need? And how we can build this new globalization? It seems to me the networking, the countries, unions, it's just idea, of course. But maybe it could work. And we can use big Eurasia, new emerging countries, like testing ground.
So could I ask you this? You don't see it as necessarily being damaging in terms of the competitiveness of this. You could see it being, if you like, slightly symbiotic, whereby a relationship over here between a number of different countries, economies, politics, security, could work not against that group over here, but could work in harmony.
It's serious questions about it's a question about nature of human beings and their behavior. It's, of course, first of all, we have some optimistic signals, some optimistic signs. First of all, it's a good sign. First of all, never before have people lived so well, so good. Of course, there are some suffering countries. There are a lot of, unfortunately, victims. But at the same time, situation is better than, for instance, 30 years ago. Generally, maybe I can repeat, there are some conflicts. And it seems to me it could give us some hopes for future. It's first. Second, it's most important. You have discussed. You discussed it 10 minutes ago. Number of elephants and mouse. It's necessary to clarify situation. First of all, from this world, this Earth lies on 4 elephants. No, not on 2. 4 elephants. And our main task to help these elephants to come to the rest, to be calm and quiet. And maybe, of course, it's a metaphoric sentence, but it seems to me we should think about new balance, because now we are living in the world of anarchy, like before First World War, Second World War. Maybe the world order, now we need new world order, because maybe during Cold War there was previous mic was not good because echoed a little bit. Perhaps it's a bit better.
We'll see if this one works. Can I take that question over to you, Mr. President, and ask you, if the world is more prosperous now than it ever was, if we are to believe what we are told, that fewer people are dying in conflict now than ever before, although it would be hard to believe this, how do you convince those people who don't see their situation improving that they should vote or put into power those people who perhaps can make them economically sound, in other words, an emerging power, when what they want, as we're seeing at the moment, is change now? And I'll come to see why about that in just a moment. How do you convince them that there has to be done something in the longer term rather than tomorrow?
Bueno, en primer lugar quiero plantear que no estoy absolutamente de acuerdo en que se diga que estamos mejor que hace 30 años. Estamos cada vez peor. Estamos en un fin de época. Jóvenes aumentando el suicidio en todo el mundo, que nos están gritando, nos están diciendo, queremos quedarnos en este mundo. Queremos quedarnos en la tierra, no mate más nada. En Estados Unidos, cada 6 horas muere generalmente un joven por sobredosis. Además del suicidio que aumenta, el otro suicidio, el más lento. No, no estamos mejor. No estamos mejor. Podemos estar mejor quizás económicamente, transaccionalmente, pero el mundo está cada vez peor. Reitero, estamos en un fin de época. Fíjense qué pocas mujeres hay. Ellas son la paz. Ellas son la paz. Las necesitamos. Pero en estos lugares generalmente 10, 20% de mujeres. Las necesitamos. La bendita revolución femenina avanza y Dios quiera que rápidamente tenga...
So are you suggesting perhaps that there is need now? I'll wait until you can hear, Mr. President. Are you suggesting perhaps now that while you dispute the figures, there is need now for action rather than acceptance, and therefore the idea of tying yourself as a young person to prosperity now is better than waiting for prosperity with an emerging economy down the line?
Mire, yo no creo sinceramente que los jóvenes nos miran y aparecemos como gente de museo, antidiluvianos. No nos entienden, no quieren entendernos, no quieren entendernos. Le hemos dejado este mundo, o le estamos dejando este mundo. Ahí está. Y todavía le decimos que están mejor. No están mejor, no estamos mejor. Cuando hacemos estos actos, generalmente los jóvenes, los más jóvenes tienen 50, 55 años. Yo he estado permanentemente en reuniones con jóvenes en toda América. A mí me tocó construir la comunidad sudamericana. No piensan como nosotros. Es otra cosa. Es otra cosa y quiero que la entendan. Y los otros, los más chiquitos, los nietos nuestros, son los nuevos, son los que nos vienen a reemplazar. Somos los últimos sapiens y tenemos la soberbia de no escucharlos. Y hoy nos espanta porque aparecen los veganos. Yo como carne, toda mi vida. ¿Pero qué nos están diciendo millones de veganos en el mundo? ¿Saben qué nos están diciendo? ¿Saben qué están diciendo? Son los primeros que se mueven por un tema eminentemente espiritual. Lo mismo que los más chicos. Queremos quedarnos aquí. No matemos más. No, reitero, comemos el 60% de
Although I would argue...
Por eso, cuando en un programa, reuniones que permanentemente voy, se habla del tema económico duramente y no de una economía de la felicidad. Y bueno, yo no puedo estar de acuerdo y todo lo que se habla yo coincido. Yo no puedo hablar de Asia ni de África, pero sí créame que puedo hablar de un continente donde los tuits del presidente hacen que un día somos el pozo de mierda. Así lo llama el presidente de Estados Unidos. Y otro día somos extraordinarios. Es decir, no se puede hacer política en serio en una América donde de los 10 países sudamericanos, en el marco de la Guerra Fría, propusieron y llevaron a cabo 7, 8 dictaduras. En 10, 8. No se puede. No es fácil. No es fácil. Y yo estoy hablando exclusivamente de lo que conozco, que es la realidad de los pueblos de América.
We may well be museum pieces, but there are, Mr. President, good museums and bad museums. And I wonder what we are perhaps leaving here for the young people to whom you refer, who you think we've dealt them a bad hand, I would say, that the challenge, and let's bring in CY and then Rashida on this one, the challenge for emerging powers is not necessarily to say we need to sign this trade deal, we need to sign this trade deal, we need to sign this political agreement. It is to rebalance, to get the yin and the yang back together again for our children and our children's children. My grandson will be 7 next week, and I think we owe him something. Although I think the people who exploit vegans, Mr. President, do leave something to be desired. I saw a piece of broccoli in a shop the other day that had vegan broccoli written on it. They're taking things a little bit too far. Can I ask you about that one, CY? Take Hong Kong, for example.
Well, the world obviously has moved on. By the way, say happy birthday to the young boy. I cast my mind back to life and politics in the UK, where I spent 3 years, your home country, David, as a young student, took an interest in British politics. And 40 plus years hence, I'm still very interested in British politics. the machination, the process, and the quality of politics in the UK have changed. Sadly, I'm speaking as an outsider, foreigner, things have gone downhill. There is a lot of manipulation, what I call manipulative politics around, that doesn't help. It doesn't help the young generation in getting a full picture of life, society, country, and the world. Now, back to Hong Kong, you have a problem when you have a stagnant economy. You have a problem, too, when you have a fast-growing economy, when there's too much to go around. Now, the problem in Hong Kong, okay, we may have housing and other livelihood issues. The problem that we face now is a question of democratic aspirations for a place, Hong Kong, that practices not two countries, two systems, not one country, one system, but the unique model, the unique arrangement of one country, two systems. Now, how do you define democracy and universal suffrage in a place that is neither a country nor an ordinary city like Paris, London, New York, or Tokyo? In Hong Kong, we have a high degree of autonomy because, in addition to the people's mandate through elections, the elected candidate is devolved additional powers by the central authority in Beijing. And that gives the Hong Kong chief executive and the government that he or she leads a high degree of autonomy. We do things in Hong Kong that mayors and city governments of London, Paris, New York, and Tokyo cannot do. Now,
I'm sorry to cut you a little bit short on this one, because what I was driving at, is whether the protests, and mainly young protesters on the streets, is something to make emerging powers look at different horizons. Because the ones that people are looking at the moment, and Rashida, I'll come to you in just a moment, because you are still in your youth, having learned to scuba dive only 2 years ago. Is it time to change the priorities? And Hong Kong is an example of this.
Well, we were caught on the hop, and we need to understand 4 months, it's too long with these problems, but 4 months is too short to understand what exactly the new generation has in mind. And they are young, they're too young. 1/3 of the 2,000 plus people arrested in the past 4 months are below the age of 18. So a very new phenomenon. So watch over the kids, even the 7-year-olds.
Rashida, I won't give away any idea of what vintage you are. Can you not hear me very well?
Rafida, not Rashida.
I'm sorry, Rafida.
Yeah.
I won't give away any suggestion as to what age you might be, but as I say, you learned to scuba dive 2 years ago.
Your voice is disappearing. Can you move it a little way?
Further away.
Yeah. That's how politicians talk.
Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry if I haven't had it right.
Yeah, I know, but
Is it time to look at the youth of today and say they've got it right, that those people who've led them in a particular direction, suggesting that this is where emerging powers should go, have got it wrong, and that there needs to be a reappraisal?
Let me put it this way. One similar thread that runs across most emerging economies is that demographic profile, which is very acute to the young. And as you know, social media, the internet is the main driver of the lives of the young today. And this has, to my mind, enhanced political participation amongst the young. So the participatory politics is now very clear amongst the young. Look at Hong Kong, look at anywhere else where there are demonstrations and trouble. It's not because they're just there for fun, but they understand to some extent. If I participate in whatever this cause is, I'll bring the change. That was not like that, 2 decades ago. So this is a new phenomenon. Now, having said that, emerging economies, countries of that medium-sized range, let alone the smaller ones, must factor in this new demographic profile.
And they will be more successful as a result.
Not more successful, but at least the policy formulation, whether it is domestic policy or policy vis-a-vis neighbors, such as having trade agreements, economic arrangements, will at least factor in what these youngsters expect out of economic and socioeconomic development.
Andre, I will come to you in just a moment, but Eduardo, former president of Argentina, was nodding in agreement with some of what Rafida said, and you really did get us started on this idea of betraying the youth of today.
Quería traer el caso de Chile a esta reunión. Hasta ayer 10 jóvenes murieron. Quiero contarles que no es habitual en Sudamérica que pase eso, para nada habitual. Chile es el país que más ha progresado de la región, el que más ha progresado. Un país de 18 millones de habitantes, relativamente pequeño, su economía ha crecido muchísimo, pero eso no le basta a los jóvenes que se dan cuenta que estamos viviendo en un sistema en que por lo menos yo creo que se torna cada vez más injusto. Las diferencias son más grandes. Cada día los ricos tienen más y los pobres tienen menos. En días pasados fue un día de particular enojo mío. Leo en el diario y hay una medicación sueca para no para curar una enfermedad, simplemente para detenerla. Quiero contarles a quienes escuchan, si no lo verán por aquí, ¿sabe cuánto vale la primera aplicación de esa medicina? 1 millón de euros. Parece mentira, ¿no? No es mentira. No es mentira, es cierto. Averigüé con la gente de los médicos. 1 millón de euros. Quiere decir que están preparando el sistema en el que creemos. Están preparando una medicina para megamillonarios. ¿No serán los organismos de salud internacionales los que le digan a los que han creado esos medicamentos cuánto han gastado? ¿10 millones de euros? Ahí tiene 20, pero eso es para todos. Ese es el sistema que queremos creer. Yo, de viejo, lo veo así. Los chicos lo ven muy distinto. Créame, yo me reúno permanentemente con los jóvenes. Los jóvenes no ven lo que nosotros vemos. Los jóvenes ven que sus amigos, sus vecinos.
Was it not always this way, though?
¿Cómo? No, es ahora. Ecuador de hace 15 días. Las movilizaciones de los jóvenes con una excusa, porque el boleto en Chile, que aumentara un 5% el boleto del subte, no es el motivo. El motivo es otro. Están enojados. Los jóvenes están enojados. Y nosotros creemos que están mejor. No están mejor. Tienen un problema que lo saben solo ellos y que nosotros no alcanzamos a entender a nuestros hijos y a tu nieto de 7 años. Quizás te pase con el de 7 mío. ¿Sabes qué vino a decirme un día? Te lo cuento, termino de contarte esto. Yo soy pescador de tiburones. Parate, termino. Mejor dicho, era. ¿Sabes por qué? Vio la foto, tiburón enorme que pescó el abuelo, se acercó y me dice: abuelito, ¿por qué lo mataste? No pesco más tiburones, tiene razón él. Al viejo rey de España, Juan Carlos, le hicieron entender los chicos, los que están en las redes, que no se pueden cazar más animales en África. Perdió el 40% de su imagen positiva y tuvo que abdicar. Esos son los jóvenes a los que nosotros ni siquiera escuchamos y los miramos con el desdén de que los sabios miramos a los chicos. Nos equivocamos.
So perhaps as we come to, thank you very much indeed, Mr. President, perhaps as we come to the final stages of this panel discussion, I could ask you, each one of you, to sum up, because it seems to me that we've gone in the direction where we've been led almost by Mr. President here to think actually that the system as we have it at the moment is pretty much broken. That if powers want to emerge, they have to be more holistic. They have to take into account everybody's feelings and everybody's futures. And it's pretty much time to dump the leadership we have at the moment, because you're going nowhere with it. Andre, your thoughts first.
Thank you very much again. But first of all, it seems to me we need to elaborate, to create new language for description contemporary political and economic processes. During last 20 minutes, we were discussing behavior of young people. It's a very important point, and it's a serious, because this summer in Moscow, we saw some youth protests, not of course so powerful like in Gangwon, but it's very interesting, and I can sense that the main problem is that now we can see new generation of people, new generation of people who can who are immersed, if you like, immersed in new communication system, world communication system. It's a very important thing, maybe more important than we are considering. Second point is that if in Russia, in Moscow, we paid attention this summer that what is the core of young protests? New generation. First, a real post-Soviet generation. Like in 1968 in Paris, Cohn-Bendit, very famous French philosopher and politician, mentioned that in 1968, first real post-Second World War generation participated in mass protests in Paris in 1968. Just now. And maybe we can think about the same process in other countries. It concerns Hong Kong, perhaps Latin America. In Russia, we see that these people, they don't know old or Soviet time. They have grown up in very attractive prosperity city called Moscow. They know nothing about Soviet reality. And now they're new patriots. They are looking for new equality, new rights, and new brilliant world. This strange girl, Greta, who was nominated on Nobel Prize, she's a very nice person, but she's extremely naive and bold at the same time. It's maybe we should recognize that new reality is coming. Maybe this new reality has came, but we cannot recognize it.
Thank you very much indeed. Rafida, do you want to add to that? Perhaps it's not about signing treaties. Perhaps it's not about signing treaties with anybody. It's about leaving a legacy for our children for the future. That's what emerging powers, all powers should.
I don't think it's just about leaving a legacy for the young people. It's about now incorporating them, their views, into our own policy formulation today. Because to me, you cannot detach ourselves from them. You know, like the days of yore when the powers that be set up education system, set up whatever it was. For us, we just went in, you know, we were not consulted. Today, the young want to be consulted. This is our, not a problem, but this is the factor that we must always remember. So policymakers, both in the public and the private sector domain, must listen to the young. They may not always be right, but at least listen. There must be communication. Gone are the days about telling them what to do, this is what we want of you. Because they want to say in everything, even in bilateral negotiations. These young people don't know much about trade, but they can tell you, we don't like this because of ABC, whatever it is. And so listening to them at least gives them that impression in their minds that they're not being marginalized. That's important going forward to the future. Otherwise, they will not subscribe to what we do as policymakers.
Can I just add this? When you say gives the impression, perhaps, that they are not being marginalized,
Yes.
How do you actually leave them so that they are not marginalized rather than that they think they're not?
If we continue to touch base with them, communicate with them, not necessarily bringing them to the table for everything that we do, but at least do not leave them out. You know, you have youth organizations that represent them. You have so many channels and avenues that can be used to bring in the voices of the young. To me, it's important.
And will that, Mr. President, as we come to wrap up this evening session, I found it fascinating. We've gone in directions that I didn't expect us to go in. Will that make the world a more prosperous place, which is really, I suppose, what we were talking about here?
Sí, yo creo que sí, pero hay un tema que me interesó mucho, de lo que aquí se habló recientemente. Lo único que nos puede entender a los jóvenes, y esto vengo hablando y trabajando en eso hace 35 años, miren lo viejo que soy. Todos mis libros de la temática adicciones, que son 7, tienen la misma dedicatoria prospectiva a los jóvenes de hoy, decía en ese tiempo y ahora. Primer eslabón de una nueva era en la historia de la humanidad, de aquellos que aún creemos que el amor puede unirnos. Lo único que nos puede unir a las generaciones no es lo racional, es el amor. No tengan ninguna duda. No tengo tiempo, si tengo un minuto lo cuento en un minuto. Me acerca un señor, salía de una cancha de fútbol y me agradece por algo que ha pasado hace 40 años. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué fue? Estaba dando una charla sobre adicciones. Entró el señor al teatro y vio que el intendente en ese tiempo estaba hablando de que ya los jóvenes eran distintos, tan raros, no contestan, se recluyen. Y yo le aconsejaba a la gente allí que vayan a la casa, se tiran encima del hijo o la hija, que lo aprieten, que lo besen, que le digan que lo amamos, que es lo más importante que tenemos en la vida. Eso es lo que hay que hacer. Porque mi generación estaba segura del amor de sus padres. La mía estaba segura. Los chicos no están seguros. Únicamente el amor puede unirnos.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed. It is definitely about cooperation rather than competition as we end on that note. And perhaps next year, I was fascinated by the fact that we got fairly quickly to the idea it's about future generations rather than where we go tomorrow. It is something that the young people of today want immediately, but it is their future, and I suppose the entire world's future, that we have to think about. Perhaps next year, if we're in this position again where we're talking about emerging economies, we should have a moderator who is half the age that I am and a panel that is just a few years younger than perhaps yourselves. Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.